Learning to estimate from our reference to transfer into our drawing distances and proportions and angles accurately is clearly a vital drawing skill. And it doesn't matter what we draw or the style in which we draw it, we still have to be able to work out particularly the major structures and angles and get them accurate, get their positions, the lines that define them and so forth, all in the right proportion. How do we do this so that we end up with drawings that look right? The answer is the same way we get all our drawing skills, through practice. Let me explain how you can practice these skills in a fraction of the time you might think you'd have to use. We'll start with this part of the facade of the Mitchell Library in Sydney. Now we're thinking scale proportions. So let's look at this column. And we're aiming to get a same size. And then there's a bit above that and there's a bit below that. And I can move across, so I think I'm about right, just a little bit too high, but that's fine. And now we have this entablature, which I think from here to here is about that high. Now, I don't know how far along to take it yet. Now I look at this gap here, and I think it's about that far. And then the width of the column is about that. Now there's a gap here now that's about the same as from there to there, maybe a tiny bit larger. So from there to there, I'm thinking here to here, tiny bit larger maybe. And then there's another column. Now we're looking straight on, so all these columns are the same. And then there's two more gaps the same as that. And now we have this gap again. And then we have the final column. And that tells me then that the entablature ends here. That goes to here, from there to there. And then there's about that much, which has these little bits in them. And then there's about that much. And then the question is, how high up do we do this? And it's sort of above the middle. I'd put a dot and then estimate and then check. And that's going to look correct. So you might say, well, this is hardly a drawing. So what have you practiced? What I've practiced is estimating where I think the major elements are going to be. But it took me less than 2 minutes to do it. And now I need to mark my work. I need to critique what I've done. How accurate has my outline of the bare bones of this scene been? And to do that, I just need a bit of paper. Now, this of course hinges on the fact that I've been trying to draw it the same size. And let's have a look. And I'm pretty happy with that. I didn't even have to video this 2 or 3 times to get it right. Well, let's look at the other challenge, and that's from here to here. From the base, this line I've drawn, to the top. How did I go there? And gosh, I'm blushing. So that tells me that the way I'm thinking and estimating things is quite accurate. And if I were drawing this, I'd have been a little more careful with these lines. But this would have been enough outline for me then to come back and in more detail add the details. And so forth. The important thing to remember though, especially if this turns out nicely, is that I'm not creating a drawing in this session. I am practicing the skill of estimating proportions and angles and so forth. And I only therefore need to draw as much as I need to be able to measure well how accurate I've been. Instead now of spending maybe 50 minutes, 2 hours finishing the drawing over the top of this, I can move straight on and I can repeat this exercise or do another exercise. And therefore I can concentrate my learning faster and more effectively because I'm able to do it closer together and more frequently and it only takes me a couple of minutes. I want to look at two very different examples of things we could try and ways we could think when we're doing this practice. Our second example is on the other side of the world in Edinburgh. And this is primarily a vertical estimation, which often is a very different sort of challenge. Now, where we start and how we do this, there are no rules. It's the principle of doing it, and it really changes, I think, for every drawing. For this subject, I'm going to start in the middle, try and get this as accurately proportioned and sized as I can, and then go up and down. I'm going to start with basically the top of this window and this ledge here, and look at this space here. And I am trying to do this the same size. Now, one thing we can do that sometimes after we've established our very first part, particularly if we're not super confident in our skill in this, is we can just measure the first little part so that if it's too far wrong, we can have another go at that. Because in some ways, doing this first section requires probably the most of this skill because we have nothing else to reference from on our page. And so I can check it by just looking at some key element of that component. And that's looking okay. I'm actually a tiny bit too narrow. And if I look at the height's okay. And I can actually add a little bit there because there is a buttress that comes out. I don't need to draw any more of this because this is just for estimation. And so my next line is going to come across here because this and this is pretty much the same. Goes in slightly, but I'm really wanting this same distance, which there's this section. And now we have our spire to go. So this is what we've drawn. How does that compare with this? So this has to go up further than what we've already drawn, but not by a huge amount. That's about the same. And so maybe that's about the extra. Now this lines up pretty well above there. That will do for this. Now, I'm not adding any more to this because I'm not doing a drawing. I'm just fast tracking my session so that I can do more of them more easily, more quickly to work out the essential parts. Now we come down and there is a band here. And again, it's pretty similar, the height. If we're not sure of our proportions, sometimes when there are significant lines such as this one and this one, it can help us to put them in because that does change our perception. This seems to be the next place we can come down to. So in my mind, this would be what I do. So I want something here now that's less than what we've drawn. And we have a roof line that comes in at this angle right on that point. So that makes, how was that? That was a good estimation. And now we have the top of this bay for a window. And then at this point we have the ground. And this is all I need to do to be able to now measure what I've done. I don't know if you're nervous, but I am. So from that top bit down to the very base, let's see how we've gone. From the top down to the base. Okay, so mine is a little bit compressed, but let's see where that happened. We'll measure the top half, at the top of the tower to here, where we started. The top of the tower to where we started. Well, that's about half the distance. And therefore, I dare say if we go down here, yep. So I've, if you like, spread the error equally. It's the critiquing that's vital, because that's what gives us direction for where we're likely to be making errors, but also giving us perhaps more confidence when we're not, where we're not. It lets us focus. If my horizontal estimations are more accurate than my vertical ones, then that tells me where I need to focus these skills exercises for maximum improvement. This is a more complex scene, but we want to draw as much as we can across here, say from this spot to the corner in here, and see how accurately we can spread across all these elements of our drawing and keep our estimations and how then we apply those estimations on our paper as close as we can in both directions. So I'm starting here, and there is an entablature that's going to be about that size. And then we have a column. Now, I'm looking at the column. I've gone way too big, partly because the base was cluttered visually, even though it wasn't obscured. So that's something to look out for. And now we have this space in here. We have something similar. And now we have and now we've come to this section here. So I've estimated that angle, and that angle's looking okay. Now I'm just going to jump from there to here, and I'm looking at this distance, not the diagonal. It's much harder to estimate accurately on the diagonal than straight across. And I've got now a column, and then I've got 3 more of them. At this point, one way of cross-checking is to say, well, does this feel like the same shape on mine? And I feel like mine's a bit narrower. I suspect the answer is more that it's a bit too high rather than not wide enough. But we'll push on and we'll see when we measure at the end. Now we have this gap, another pilaster. Now we have a column that's freestanding, and now we have these 2 round columns that look like they have a gap of about that. Shadows behind columns are a great way to shift them slightly when we need to. This now is what we're looking at. But before we check it, I'll just go up a little bit. And if we were drawing all this, it would be about that much. Let's have a look. So this is what we want ours to be, or what I want mine to be. Okay. So I've gone too small in my widths. The question is, have I gone too small in my heights? And yes, I have, but that I've increased the width proportionately about the same as the height, so that my scale now is slightly smaller, but my proportions are the same. So I would take that as okay. In fact, it's a very important skill to be able to observe in a way that we can deliberately change the scale, make it half as large again or half as small again. Again, I haven't added all these extra things because this is enough to give me a few minutes practice on observation, estimating, drawing, checking, critiquing. But it can be helpful to plan to do this same drawing for a drawing session soon so that I can build on what I've learned in this practice session. And I'm able to fast track this skill because every session doesn't have the burden of doing the whole drawing, finishing the whole drawing. I can just focus on drawing enough to give me a good workout on the skill I want to improve. But I would suggest that we draw this in a way that wouldn't stop us from continuing the drawing in our drawing style. In other words, don't develop a method where you're putting lines on this that you couldn't have on your finished drawing, because we're still developing a way of doing this that's not just for exercises, but will actually work in with how we draw and how we want our drawings to look at the end. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Please hit the like button if this has been helpful. This is how I estimate and keep in proportions, particularly in freehand ink drawings, such as this one from a couple of years back that you're seeing now. But it's an incredibly effective learning strategy to work on individual skills if possible and to build those skills then quickly and strongly. So if your proportions and estimations are a bit tricky for you, why not work on these without the time burden of completing a whole drawing? But hey, whatever you draw, however you draw it, however it looks, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.